Imagine waking up one day with the terrifying realization that no one around you is who you thought they were. Not your best friend, not your lover, not even yourself. You sit at the breakfast table staring across at someone whose face you've memorized 1,000 times, their smile, their voice, the tiny quirks you once called endearing. But something is wrong. A detail you never noticed, a pause before a reply, a rehearsed nod, a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. Suddenly every interaction feels like a performance, and you're not sure who wrote the script. What if every relationship in your life was based on a lie? What if people aren't what they say but what they hide? And what if the truth isn't buried deep, but hidden in plain sight? Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Every deep thinker is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood." Let that sink in. Not afraid of being misunderstood, but of being truly seen. Why? Because once you see someone clearly, the raw, unfiltered truth beneath the masks, the illusion collapses, and without illusion, most people cannot love, cannot trust, cannot stay. We crave depth, but worship surface. You see, the real tragedy isn't that people are hard to read, it's that you were never taught how. Modern psychology tries to simplify human nature into buzzwords: narcissist, empath, introvert, overthinker, as if complex souls can be flattened into categories. But Nietzsche understood something most still don't. He believed that beneath every smile hides a motive, every gesture masks a wound, and every word carries the fingerprints of fear, desire, and survival. And if you could learn to see the 18 psychological truths he hinted at throughout his work, not as theories, but as weapons of clarity, you'd never be deceived again. You'd walk into a room and without a word, you'd know who's pretending, who's insecure, who's manipulating, who's silently screaming, who's craving power, who's trying to disappear. But here's the catch: if you truly want to read others, you must first be willing to read yourself. And that is the most terrifying book you'll ever open. Because what if you've been projecting your wounds onto others? What if the liar you always found in others was a shadow you refused to see in yourself? What if every person who hurt you was merely reflecting a truth you were not ready to accept? Nietzsche's truths are not comfortable. They do not coddle your ego or tell you you're always right. They shatter illusions, violently, unapologetically, and force you to confront the unbearable complexity of human nature. So ask yourself, do you really want to see people as they are, or just enough to feel safe? Do you seek truth or confirmation? Do you want to understand others or just control them? Because once you begin to see through people, you can never unsee it. And once you begin to see yourself, you can never lie to yourself again. Are you ready for that kind of clarity? Because if you are, what follows is not a checklist or a trick. It is a transformation. The 18 psychological truths you're about to discover aren't just tools to understand others. They are mirrors that will burn away your pretenses, challenge your certainties, and awaken something ancient inside you. The ability to see, truly, instantly, deeply. But before we begin, you must understand something even darker. The reason you've never been taught to read people isn't ignorance. It's design. Let's explore the hidden problem, the reason why truth is punished and illusion rewarded. Shall we begin? Why is it that the truth is feared, but lies are celebrated? Why is it that you can go through life surrounded by people, friends, lovers, co-workers, even family, and yet feel like no one actually sees you? Here's the unsettling answer. Society doesn't want you to read people, it wants you to play along. From childhood, you were conditioned, not educated. You were trained in the subtle, invisible art of mask making. Be polite, smile when you're sad, nod even when you disagree, say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart inside. You were taught to prioritize comfort over honesty, appearances over essence, compliance over authenticity. But have you ever asked why? Nietzsche believed that civilization is not a reflection of our nobility but our fear. He wrote, "We have art so that we shall not die of the truth." Let that echo for a moment. Not beauty, not love, art. Our ability to invent meaning in the face of unbearable reality. Because reality, raw, unfiltered reality, is horrifying. Behind every smile lies a survival strategy. Behind every gesture, a buried trauma. Behind every social nicety, a carefully rehearsed compromise between who you are and who you must pretend to be. And here's the hidden problem. You are taught to read books, not people. You are rewarded for memorizing formulas, not decoding intentions. You are praised for following rules, not for understanding motives. Why? Because a society full of people who can see, truly see, cannot be controlled. They cannot be sold false dreams. They cannot be manipulated with shame, fear, or flattery. They do not fall in line. To keep a society functioning, masks are necessary. But Nietzsche called this a slave morality, a system of values built not on truth but on obedience, guilt, and denial of the self. You are not allowed to say what you want. You are taught to suppress rage, pleasure, wildness, anything that threatens the fragile order. But the cost of this suppression, you lose the ability to see what's real. You begin to judge people by what they show, not what they conceal, by words, not by energy, by status, not by substance. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to survive in society, but he warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege begins when you tear away the persona, in yourself and in others, and stare into the void beneath. That void isn't empty. It's filled with everything repressed, denied, unspoken, your shadow, and everyone else's. This is why you misread people. Not because they're impossible to understand, but because you project your own wounds onto them. You assume others are kind because you crave kindness. You assume they're honest because you wouldn't lie. You assume they're safe because you fear the alternative. But what if you were wrong? What if the person you're opening your soul to isn't noble but strategic? What if their kindness is calculated? What if their interest is transactional? Schopenhauer argued that most relationships are not driven by love, but by will, a blind biological will to survive, reproduce, dominate. He wrote, "Compassion is the basis of morality," but he also believed compassion was rare, far rarer than we want to admit. Most people do not want to understand you. They want to use you, to feel desired through you, to gain status through you, to avoid loneliness, boredom, or silence through you. And you do the same. This is not cynicism. It's the clarity Nietzsche urged us to embrace, the clarity that begins when you stop idealizing human nature and start observing it, ruthlessly, honestly, fearlessly. Because until you do, you remain blind. You will keep falling for the wrong people, trusting empty words, overlooking red flags, sacrificing your soul to be understood by those who do not even understand themselves. But here's the twist. This blindness is not just a personal flaw. It is engineered by culture, by media, by religion, by family systems that reward performance over presence. You were taught to be a good person but not a perceptive one. You were taught to be nice but not real. You were taught to be liked but not to see. And when someone does see clearly, they're labeled dangerous, too intense, too cold, too cynical, because truth destabilizes the entire script. So the hidden problem isn't that people are hard to read. The problem is that you've been trained to read only the surface, the mask, the words, the resume, the Instagram feed, but the soul, the real motives, the true fears, the buried desires, those remain locked away. Unless you learn the language of the unspoken, Nietzsche believed that most people live and die as echoes, reflections of cultural norms, not sovereign minds. But those who truly see, they walk alone. They ask forbidden questions. They are often hated but never fooled. Are you ready to become one of them? Then let's peel back another layer. Let's look at the unseen consequences of this blindness, the price you've already been paying without even knowing it. There is a moment, quiet, forgettable, when the cost of not seeing begins to leak into your life. A subtle shift in how someone speaks to you, a promise not kept, an apology that doesn't land, a conversation where something feels off. You don't know it yet, but that moment is the beginning of a pattern, not a coincidence, a consequence. Because when you cannot read others, when you misjudge motives and ignore micro-signals, you don't just miss the truth. You build your life on illusions, and illusions always collect interest. You choose the wrong partner not because you're naive, but because you mistook intensity for intimacy. You hire the wrong employee not because they lied, but because you never questioned why they were so agreeable. You follow the wrong leader not because you're stupid, but because you confused confidence with competence. The price of psychological blindness is not paid in theory, it's paid in heartbreak, betrayal, burnout, regret. And here's the most disturbing part. Even when the illusion collapses, most people still don't wake up. They blame fate. They call it bad luck. They repeat the cycle again and again, hoping this time the mask won't slip. Why? Because it's easier to be deceived than to admit you never learned to see. Let's go deeper. You were wired biologically and socially to survive, not to see the truth. Truth is uncomfortable, but comfort is addictive. Your brain in its ancient architecture seeks patterns. Familiarity feels safe, and so it fills in gaps with assumptions. They're smiling, so they must like me. They're attractive, so they must be kind. They're successful, so they must be trustworthy. This is cognitive bias, your mind choosing the simplest story over the truest one. The halo effect, the confirmation bias, the attribution error, all working together like invisible filters that distort your perception. You don't see people, you see your story about them. And that story isn't neutral. It's shaped by every unresolved wound in you. If you were abandoned, you'll cling. If you were betrayed, you'll suspect. If you were never seen, you'll overcompensate. You see what you fear, or what you crave, but rarely what is. This creates a dangerous loop, one Nietzsche hinted at in his idea of eternal recurrence. You repeat emotional patterns, reliving the same archetypes, drawn to the same characters, expecting a different ending, but getting the same betrayal in a new costume. Relationships collapse, careers stall, mental health deteriorates, all because the foundational skill, reading others, remains underdeveloped, drowned beneath social scripts and emotional wounds. Let's take it further. On a societal level, the inability to read people becomes even more catastrophic. Charismatic demagogues rise to power not because their intentions are good, but because their confidence triggers your longing for certainty. You believe their lies because they mirror your desperation. Corporations manipulate your empathy with ads, your attention with outrage, your values with slogans. You click, you buy, you follow, not because you're foolish, but because you're predictable. Your psychology is not a fortress, it's a user manual, and the system, it knows you better than you know yourself. You're not choosing freely, you're reacting to what you're shown, to how you feel, to who you think someone is based not on truth, but on your blind spots. This is emotional slavery, not because someone holds your chains, but because you never noticed you were wearing them. Even more tragic is the internal cost, what happens inside you when you misread others for too long. You lose faith in people, in relationships, in love itself, because when the mask breaks and you see what was really behind it, something inside you dies. But it was never their deception that hurt you most. It was your own blindness, your inability to detect the lie before it bloomed, and that self-betrayal haunts you. So what do most people do? They armor up, they trust less, feel less, love less. They confuse skepticism with wisdom. But skepticism without perception is just bitterness in disguise. You weren't meant to numb yourself. You were meant to see clearly and then choose powerfully. That is the real danger of not learning how to read people. Not just that you'll be deceived, but that you'll eventually deceive yourself into believing that connection isn't possible, that truth is a myth, that everyone is fake. But that's not clarity. That's despair. Nietzsche warned us. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. The longer you remain blind, the easier it is to become what you once feared, a walking mask, empty and performative. But here's the truth. Nietzsche, Jung, and Schopenhauer all tried to scream beneath their heavy texts. You are not meant to walk blind. You are not meant to live reacting to illusions, trapped in patterns, mourning truths you never had the tools to see. You are meant to pierce through, to develop radical vision, to read people not as actors in your story, but as complex, contradictory living books written in micro-expressions, patterns, projections, wounds, fears, and unspoken motives. But this vision comes at a cost. It will strip away your excuses. It will end some relationships. It will force you to confront yourself. Do you still want it? Because if you do, then you must now face a choice. Stay in the comfort of blindness, or embrace the rebellion of clarity. Let's move toward that rebellion. Let's explore how to break free, how to awaken Nietzsche's 18 psychological truths inside you, and learn to read anyone instantly. What if the ability to read people was not a gift, but a revolt? A quiet act of resistance against everything society taught you to accept. A spiritual jailbreak. Because to truly see others not as they present themselves, but as they are, is to unravel a system built entirely on surface. And every system punishes what it cannot control. So if you are going to reclaim your vision, if you are going to read anyone instantly, you must begin where all rebellions begin. Not outside, but within. Step 1. Kill the pleaser within. Your first act of rebellion is simple but brutal. Stop needing to be liked. The need to be liked is the most effective blindfold ever invented. When you crave approval, you do not observe, you project. You turn others into mirrors, constantly searching for signs that you're enough. And in that scramble for affirmation, you miss the quiet micro-signals, the manipulation behind the compliment, the resentment buried in the smile, the emptiness behind the charm. Nietzsche warned of this when he said, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." He meant that even self-hatred is a twisted form of control, a way to keep playing the social game. But when you kill the pleaser, you stop reacting. You start observing. Suddenly, silence doesn't scare you. Rejection doesn't shake you. And when someone walks in the room, you don't ask, "Do they like me?" You ask, "Who are they? Really?" Step 2. Study energy, not words. Words lie. Tone reveals. Posture reveals. Silences, the pauses, the deflections, the sudden shift in eye contact, they reveal everything. You were taught to listen to language, but those who see clearly listen to energy. Jung called this symbolic vision, the ability to detect the invisible meaning beneath the surface act. When someone talks about their goals, but their body slumps, their soul has already given up. When someone laughs, but there's tension in their jaw, they're hiding pain. When someone flatters you too quickly, they're buying your loyalty. Real vision begins with noticing the inconsistencies. Not the grand betrayals, but the tiny mismatches, not the lies, the leaks. Step 3. Learn the archetypes. Every person you meet wears a costume, not just socially, but psychologically. They are playing out roles, often unconsciously. Nietzsche, influenced by Greek tragedy and myth, believed that behind every modern man was an ancient archetype, a character older than civilization itself. Jung expanded this into a full map. The hero, the victim, the rebel, the tyrant, the seductress, the martyr, the trickster. The key is not to judge the archetype, but to recognize it. Is she mothering you, or manipulating through care? Is he saving you, or feeding on your admiration? Is the nice guy just passive-aggressive in disguise? When you can read archetypes, you stop taking behavior personally. You start seeing patterns, and patterns never lie. Step 4. Embrace the dark mirror. The most powerful tool in human reading, but is shadow work. Why? Because every judgment you make reveals more about you than about them. You find narcissists everywhere? Look at where you crave validation. You always attract liars? Look at how often you avoid hard truths. Nietzsche said, "If you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." To read others cleanly, you must become a clear mirror, not clouded by projection, fear, or bias. This means confronting the parts of yourself that lie, perform, seduce, and manipulate. Not to destroy them, but to understand them. Because once you own your darkness, you stop being tricked by others who weaponize theirs. Step 5. Stop explaining yourself. Here's an uncomfortable truth. People who see rarely feel the need to explain. Why? Because explaining is often a subtle form of begging for approval, understanding, or validation. When you see clearly, your clarity is enough. You say less. You observe more. And your presence, calm, anchored, perceptive, becomes unsettling to those who are used to lying with charm. Nietzsche called this noble stillness, a kind of inner dignity that comes from self-mastery, not arrogance, not coldness, but a silence that says, "I don't need to control you, I understand you." Step 6. Reclaim your intuition. The truth is, you already know how to read people. You were born with that instinct, but it was trained out of you. You were told to be reasonable, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to suppress your gut feeling in favor of politeness. The rebellion is to trust your inner knowing again, especially when it's inconvenient. That cold feeling in your chest, that forced smile that exhausts you, that one friend who always drains your energy, believe it. Feel first, explain later. Because in a world trained to lie, intuition is your last sacred compass. You see, reading people isn't about judgment, it's about discernment, the art of knowing what belongs in your life and what doesn't. And when you combine these steps, kill the pleaser, study energy, learn archetypes, embrace your shadow, stop explaining, and trust your intuition, something begins to shift. You walk into a room and the masks feel transparent. You hear a compliment and you sense the motive. You hear silence and you detect the fear behind it. You meet someone new, and instead of getting lost in the story they tell you, you start reading the script they didn't know they were revealing. This is not magic. This is vision, born from rebellion. And once you taste it, once you've seen the machinery behind people's faces, you cannot return to blindness. But there's still one piece missing. The final, deepest shift, because reading people truly deeply is not about power, it's about truth. And there's one truth Nietzsche pointed to again and again through parable, through poetry, through madness, a truth so shattering, so liberating that once you see it, everything changes. Let's go there now, to the ultimate realization, to the final clarity. Imagine standing before a mirror that doesn't show your reflection, but your essence. No makeup, no armor, no script, just you, raw, unfiltered, unperforming. Now imagine turning that mirror toward every person you meet. No masks, no projections, no games. You don't just see what they say, you see what they hide. And here's the moment that undoes everything. You realize they were never hiding from you, they were hiding from themselves, and so were you. This is the ultimate psychological truth that Nietzsche hinted at in every paradox, every aphorism, every unsettling phrase that left readers disturbed but unable to look away. You cannot read others until you stop believing there is a self to read. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? After all this, after all the talk of perception, discernment, and shadow, now you're being told there's no one really there. Yes, and that is your freedom. Let's break it open. The myth of a fixed self. We grow up believing people have essences, fixed traits like he's kind, she's toxic, I'm an introvert, they're manipulative. We crave labels because they give us a sense of control. If I can name it, I can predict it. If I can predict it, I can stay safe. But Nietzsche demolished this illusion. He wrote, "Man is something that shall be overcome." What he meant was there is no solid identity, no fixed you, just a cluster of drives, instincts, traumas, habits, masks clashing and negotiating every second. The same is true for everyone else. What you call a person is often just a momentary balance of urges shaped by culture, repression, fear, longing, and time. The truth? People are not who they say they are. They are not even who they think they are. They are who they must be to survive the moment they're in. The freedom of seeing without judgment. Here lies the most profound shift. Once you realize people are fluid, ever-changing, and mostly unaware of themselves, you stop judging. You stop labeling people as evil or pure, fake or real. You begin to see the movements of the soul, how pain shapeshifts into pride, how fear hides inside ambition, how loneliness wears the mask of arrogance. When Nietzsche said, "There are no facts, only interpretations," he wasn't encouraging delusion. He was warning you. Every time you read someone, you are also writing part of the story. And if you do not watch your own mind, your biases, your wounds, your desire to categorize, you will misread not only others, but yourself. But when you learn to see without attachment, without the urge to control or judge, you become a mirror. And in your presence, others begin to unravel, not because you exposed them, but because they felt seen without being attacked. This is the power that awakens when you've integrated all of Nietzsche's 18 truths. You see without needing to fix. You discern without needing to defend. You feel without needing to flee. The death of illusion, the birth of vision. Here's the final, most paradoxical realization. You cannot read others until you stop trying to define them. Reading people is not about decoding them like machines. It's about sensing the dance of becoming, how their gestures, wounds, words, and silences form a temporary constellation of meaning. And once you understand that, you begin to love them differently, not as fixed roles, not as my friend, my enemy, my ex, my mentor, but as fellow fragments of chaos, trying to make sense of a world too heavy for clarity. Nietzsche didn't want you to be cold. He wanted you to burn through illusion, to become so awake, so inwardly sovereign that no lie could seduce you and no truth could frighten you. The final test. Here is how you'll know you've crossed into vision. You'll stop being surprised. When someone betrays you, you'll see the fracture that caused it. When someone loves you, you'll see the pain that made them hesitate. When someone leaves you, you'll feel the fear they couldn't speak. And you won't cling. You won't chase. You won't close. Because now you know. People aren't confusing, they are just unobserved. And once seen, they become inevitable. The last Nietzschean truth. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. This applies not just to suffering, but to perception. Once your why becomes clarity over comfort, vision over validation, truth over transaction, you no longer fear what you'll see in others, because you have already met the monster in yourself and made peace with it. You've passed through the fire. You've walked through the desert of illusions, and now what stands before you is not a person, but a mystery. And finally, you don't try to solve it. You simply witness. And in that witnessing, you see the truth. Final reflection. So now ask yourself, are you willing to read people not to control them, but to free yourself? Not to manipulate outcomes, but to see the unseeable? Not to decode masks, but to meet the trembling soul beneath? Because that is what Nietzsche's psychological truths ultimately offer. Not power, not control, not certainty, but vision. The kind of vision that doesn't blink when the masks fall. The kind of vision that doesn't flinch when the truth hurts. The kind of vision that doesn't need to judge because it finally fully understands. And with that vision, you no longer just read people, you read reality. Welcome to the rebellion, welcome to the clarity. Right now there are 2 videos on your screen handpicked just for you. Click to watch them. I'm sure you'll love every second.